happened to Charlie Hebdo is Charlie Hebdo. That's been tweeted nearly 270,000 times in the past hour alone. Another hashtag that's trending, Je suis Charlie. That's been tweeted nearly 80,000 times in the past hour. Now, Damien is at DNG BBC. He's obviously across this, following it from Paris for us. Babita BBC, Philippa BBC, keep in touch with us as well as we try to keep across what's happening on social media. Now, the French Interior Minister, Bernard Cazeneuve,
assure the protection of all France's throughout French territory. This is the reason why the Prime Minister has taken the decision to relaunch the high security alert throughout French territory. I have also sent to all the prosecutors of French territories a telegram asking them to take all the precautions with regard to train stations, cultural institutions, and a number of public places to reinforce the means for protection, so that mobilization within the police, gendarmerie, and the military, so that to have this protection in order to neutralize the three criminals who have committed this barbaric act. All the means of the Interior Ministry and the justice are mobilized in a way that the inquiry will take place as fast as possible, and to identify the aggressors and to arrest them in a way that they will be punished with the severity that corresponds to the barbaric act that they have committed. The Ministry of the Justice and the Interior, the level have been launched. The Prime Minister and myself have activated the ministerial cell, which I will preside along the next hours, so that to make sure the coordination of the state services and to broadcast the necessary information so that the French people are informed on a continuous basis about the progress of the inquiry, security of the French people throughout their territory during these particular and serious circumstances, and also to neutralize as soon as possible the three criminals who carried out this barbaric act. Thank you.
Well, the French Interior Minister there, Bernard Cazeneuve, who was talking to what happened in Paris. And we also know that John Kerry, who is currently on a mission visit even to Poland, is going to be holding a press conference to speak about this directly in around about 15 minutes' time. And as soon as he does, we'll bring that to you live here on BBC News. Also, just to bring you up to date with a tweet that's come through from the US Embassy in France, saying despite misleading press reports, there are no plans to close the US Embassy in Paris or other diplomatic facilities in France. We may hear more on that front when John Kerry speaks later this hour, and obviously, as Babita was saying, we'll go to that. Now we can speak to Francois Eisbourg, who's a European anti-terrorism expert and special advisor at the Foundation for Strategic Research. He joins us from Paris. And first, your take on the events of the day.
Well, the terrorists chose a target which was symbolic not of French policy, but of what France actually happens to be. Charlie Hebdo was a symbol of irreverence. The caricaturists who were killed were famously known for their sort of May 68 spirit, quite anti-militaristic actually in some cases. These guys were targeted not because of what France does in the world, but because of what France happens to be. This will have a significant impact on the political consequences of this terrorist act, because the population as a whole will feel challenged. This will not divide French society. I think it will tend to unite France.
Well, this did appear to be a very calmly carried out attack, didn't it? A well-planned attack, and we think we have been able to see the gunmen getting away.
Of the commandos which attacked in Bombay a few years ago. These guys had been trained to kill. They had not been trained to blow themselves up. If we learn can be. This will also, in a way, blunt the political effect which the terrorists may have. There is too much distance between this kind of military commando raid and whatever problems may exist in France in terms of the status of the Muslim population or integration or discrimination and those sorts of things. This really does look like a military act carried out against French society as a whole.
And so, in your view, the aims of this attack were to kill, to spread terror and dissent and tension within French society?
I think that the aim was to gain more influence for the jihadi group which sent them out on the global jihadi market. Don't forget that groups like Daesh or Al-Qaeda are in competition for market share. The target was such that these guys could not be seen as wanting to influence French policy in the Middle East or in Africa. You know, Charlie Hebdo was highly critical of some of those French operations. This is not a target you would have chosen if you wanted to influence French strategy. Now, these guys want to motivate their own people. They want to recruit more people. They want to develop their ability to launch operations in the Middle East and outside of the Middle East.
Clearly, intelligence is being shared right now between different European authorities, and this will lead to a high level of security across Europe.
Yeah, this is the worst terrorist act to have occurred on French territory in more than 50 years. And this is a turning point, certainly, I think, in France. There will be a very severe ramping up of anti-terrorism investment, if I can put it that way, both in terms of human resources, in terms of budget, in terms of police and security and military deployments. It's going to change people's lives somewhat.
Francois Eisberg, you're speaking to us, of course, from Paris, and even though we're talking about the security situation, police on the streets, you can't lock down a city like Paris. I mean, how does it feel to be there right now?
It feels a little bit like the calm before the storm, because, of course, the ramping up measures were announced very soon after the outrage. And for the moment, you do not yet see the practical effects of these measures. This is something which is going to happen between now and tomorrow morning. There'll be more gendarmes out there. There'll be more military people in the next few hours. Not exactly as I speak.
Francois Eisberg, thank you so much for joining us here on BBC News.
And at this hour, we know that we'll bring that to you. But as Philippa was just asking, we were just hearing there from our guests that the city remains cordoned off in the immediate area where the attack took place. And indeed, there is also extra security around embassies and also places of worship, which was reported earlier by the news agencies as the Foreign Office in France has urged people in the area to remain vigilant in what they're calling one of the worst terror attacks to hit Parisian soul for 2 decades. Well, let's get more analysis on this. Michel Gerfinkiel is the editor emeritus of weekly magazine Valeurs Actuelles and joins me from Paris. Welcome, thank you very much for being with us. I understand from what we've been hearing that the journalism community is a small one. Everybody knows each other in this field. Did you know anybody that was involved in this?
Well, I had met with Wolinski, Georges Wolinski, who was one of the elder cartoonists at Charlie Hebdo. He was actually one of the founders. Many of the actual founders passed away peacefully some years ago. Cabu was also one of the very founders of the weekly. It's a terrible shock. I would say that many French people, either among those who liked Charlie Hebdo or who disliked it may have a feeling that an entire generation of the French press and the French culture and the French humor has been wiped off.
There seems to be, though, from a number of people that we've spoken to in the last few hours, saying this was inevitable. There was an element of this was going to happen at some point. The sense that, yes, security had been stepped up, and we heard from the President of France that previous plans to attack targets, embassies and the such.
And has criticized and attacked in a very strong way, and sometimes with a lot of bad taste, every religion in the world, has also attacked Islam as a religion and Islam as the Islamists or the jihadists are turning it into. And now we come to a very tricky question. Have these journalists, Charlie Hebdo, been right in taking a courageous stand for the freedom of thought and the freedom of expression or not? And I'm afraid that they were right, and now it's up to the country, it's up to France as a government, a state, and a nation to find the appropriate answer, how to protect an entire way of life against jihadi intimidation.
How easy do you think that will be for society in France to not only address what's happened today, but also to address the wider point that you just made regarding racial tensions and ethnic minority groups in France today?
Let me be very clear about a few things. First of all, we had a very dramatic terrorist onslaught in France on several occasions in the past. 20 years ago, exactly 20 years ago, there were a minor state of emergency known as Plan Vigipirate. The police and the secret services of France have been extremely concerned about all that and very efficient to prevent a lot of violence and outrages in France. What is going to happen now? First of all, it's the French government, the present administration of France, will devise new means to fight the terrorist threat. But I'm sure that if they take the appropriate measures, they will have certainly a very large backing in the public opinion.
Michel Funke, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Well, with us now is our security correspondent, Gordon Carrera. Gordon, of course, we don't know who these men are. We haven't heard from them. What can we say about them so far for sure?
That they're well armed and well trained, I think, and that they clearly had a plan. They came there with a clear intention to kill as many as possible, but also to get away. And I think that's interesting as a different jihadist tactic from some of the others we've seen in other cases where people have perhaps created a siege situation or they wanted to die as martyrs at the scene. Here, they appear to have been trained. They knew how to fire their weapons. Just from the images and the videos we've seen, they were clearly very capable and had some level of expertise and proficiency. And then they had a getaway car. They planned to get away. What their intentions are now, clearly that's the worry. Did they want to melt away, or do they have another attack planned? For those reasons, I think the urgency will be in finding them.
And Gordon, it is this video that we're currently showing, we're seeing repeatedly, unfortunately in these circumstances, it is going to be shown again and again and again, because it is the footage that we see of the alleged attackers in the aftermath of the detail of this, the car, the number of men in it, of course, and their route as they got away. But this is clearly, as you were just saying, a thought-out plan with an intention of going from A to B in as easy a possible route as they could.
Yes, and I mean, a classic soft target, which would have been shooting their guns and trying to kill people in a shopping centre or at a train station. They very specifically picked these offices because of the associations of what had happened there in the cartoons and so on. and then they decided that they were going to get away. And as I said, I think that's a slightly different modus operandi from we've seen from other groups at times.
Well, Gordon, do stay with us just to remind our viewers that you're watching BBC News with our special coverage of the shooting in Paris. Do stay with us over the next few minutes and hours.
Oh, I can take it tomorrow. Time for that to be colder.
Taking up on that point, our security correspondent Gordon Crowe stays with us here in the studio, and obviously now, Gordon, much is going to be spoken about where these men may possibly be at the moment.
Yes, and they may have some clues from the car, and they might have some idea. They'll be doing a kind of intelligence detective work, trying to work out who they might be and what associates they might have. And then the hope will be to find them, see if there's anyone else linked with them, try and establish if they came from a particular group. There have been issues, could they have been returnees from Iraq and Syria who'd fought out there? Would that explain the weapons training? That's one possibility. There's also talk, although it's unverified, that in the offices they'd said we're from Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda in Yemen. Again, that's unverified, so we don't know for sure. But that will be one of the issues. Are these self-starters, as they put it, a group of people who just decided to do something, or were these people linked to other groups who are receiving instructions, directions from some kind of controlling mind abroad?
I just wanted to ask if you know of details of, nearby airports, if anything has been shut down or is being monitored, or, even ports or possible getaway places that there is heavy surveillance now.
Well, there's likely to be all that kind of work going on for looking for suspicious people at ports. I mean, it's interesting. If you go back to some of the other major terrorist attacks, look at the Madrid bombings in 2004, what happened was a group of people involved were surrounding an apartment and by police and then blew themselves up. If you look at the 21st of July bombings in London in 2005,
Gordon, you were making that point that police security sources won't quite know who they're looking for because several different names of groups have emerged so far. We know that the last tweet, for example, that Charlie Hebdo put out was one rather taunting the leader of Islamic State. And yet, I was just speaking to Francois Eisberg in Paris, who said, well, these different groups are competing, as he put it, for market share.
That's absolutely true. And I think, a group like Al-Qaeda, the old Al-Qaeda, and some of its affiliates, like Al-Qaeda in North Africa or in Yemen, which always have had links into France and been able to do things, are keen to show that they are still a force against this new group of ISIS. So there is competition there to do something. And in a sense, I think, as he was saying, that this is a very high-profile attack, which within those jihadist circles will get them a lot of credit because of the portrayal of the Prophet Muhammad in those cartoons. So obviously condemnation everywhere else, but within jihadist circles, it will receive credit. And so that could play into this idea that this is a group trying to establish themselves or in competition with others.
And just to pick up on that thought, one of the areas that will be being really scrutinised now is social media, is what's being said on those sites and those accounts that are sympathetic to such causes.
I think that's one of the things they'll look for. Is any group claiming responsibility? Is any group particularly tweeting about it, as they often do? Will we see any video of the attack come up? I mean, we've obviously seen from people who've shot the video. You sometimes will get people involved in the attack shooting video. It doesn't look like it in this case, and especially with a small group of gunmen. Will someone put up a video? Have they pre-prepared a video which they might want to distribute at some point, trying to justify their actions? All of those things are possible and increasingly done through social media now.
Gordon, thank you very much for now. I know you're going to stay with us for more reaction on this. Our security correspondent there, Gordon Carrera. And stay with us because we are expecting to hear from the US Secretary of State, John Kerry, in the next few minutes, reacting to this live from Poland. But you're watching BBC News. Stay with us.
Well, you're watching us here on BBC News with our special coverage of the attack in Paris, where we now know that 12 people have died, 10 journalists, 2 policemen. The French Interior Minister has talked about, in his words, the 3 criminals who've committed this barbaric act, and of course, a manhunt is underway.
Indeed, as we were just hearing from our security correspondent, who is still with us here in the studio, Gordon Carrera, about the level of the surveillance that is now underway, with all possible avenues being explored regarding ports and airport exits in France.
Well, let's get more now from the scene. I believe we can speak to journalist Stéphane de Vries. Stéphane, thank you for joining us here on BBC News.
Well, the situation here is very chaotic, actually. I arrived on the scene only 10 minutes after the events happened because our offices are right nearby. And there's a huge police force Many emergency units are here. Lots of journalists, as you can see as well. It's a big mess. The events happened around 12 p.m. Paris time. So that's about 6 hours ago now, and it's still very unclear what exactly happened. And my colleagues and I, we are all very shocked because 10 of our colleagues have been killed today. It was a cold-blooded murder.
Charlie Hebdo had been the focus of attacks before, hadn't it? And I understand that some of the journalists there had personal police protection.
Yes, absolutely. And the building was also being guarded by police officers. The editor-in-chief, who has been killed also today, was always accompanied by 2 security officers wherever he went for the last 3-4 years. So there was high security, but unfortunately, as the events of today show, not high enough.
And just remind us how much Charlie Hebdo figured on the French media scene. I know it was a relatively small concern. It folded at one point, didn't it? But it always managed to make waves.
Yeah, it's a relative small circulation, especially if you compare them to magazines in the UK, for instance. But it's a well-known magazine, and it always ridiculizes religions, Christianity, Islam, but also politicians. They make fun of a lot of things. There are a lot of cartoons in it as well. So it's very sad what happened today.
And as you're absorbing that shock about what has happened to your fellow journalists, there is also, of course, the very current situation of these men on the loose, on the run in Paris.
Absolutely. There are 3 men on the run. There's a huge manhunt going on now in the Paris surroundings. The 3 suspects got away while shooting at the police. Some police officers were also wounded. And apparently their car has been found in the northern areas of Paris, but there's no trace of the 3 men. But of course, I assume the whole police force of France and maybe even the army will hunt these people down because this is the most deadly terrorist attack France has ever known. And also policemen have been killed, so the police will do everything to catch them.
And you're expecting to hear again from the President, François Hollande?
Yes, he will address the nation in a television speech tonight at 8 p.m. Paris time. Then he was already at the premises this morning at the scene where he gave a short statement to us, to the press. But it was clear he as well was in shock. He knew the editors of the magazine personally. So it was clear that he didn't really know what happened as well. It was shocking to see, actually.
Stefan de Vries, we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Well, let's just bring you up to date with what we know so far this hour, that a major manhunt is underway in Paris and indeed in France, where heavily armed gunmen, 3 we believe, are on the run after killing 12 people, bursting into the offices of the satirically weekly magazine Charlie Hebdo. And of course, we understand it was a late morning attack at the headquarters in a very Stéphane Charbonnier.
Well, news of the shooting unfolded also on social media as details began to emerge. At first, Adam Collins tweeted, "Madness down the street from our Paris flat. Shots fired, dozens of police, emergency vans. We cleared out as police zone being taped up." Meanwhile, leaders across the world have also, as you'd expect, been expressing their condolences. UK Prime Minister David Cameron saying, "The murders in Paris are sickening. We stand with the French people in the fight against terror and defending the freedom of the press." Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi tweeted, "Condemnable and despicable attack in Paris. Our solidarity with the people of France. My thoughts are with the families of those who lost their lives." President Hollande has described the attack as barbaric. He's held an emergency meeting in the Élysée Palace with his top cabinet members. We should hear more from him in the next few hours. And thousands of people, thousands of you have been tweeting using this image and the hashtag Je suis Charlie, I am Charlie, to honour those who died. It's been tweeted more than 70,000 times in the last hour. Many people and organisations, including the French Embassy on Twitter, are using this as their profile picture.
Well, as we've been hearing, the offices of this satirical magazine were previously targeted and have been under threats by extremist groups for some time now. Offices were burnt down in a petrol attack back in September of 2011, and at the time a wider conversation took place in France regarding freedom of expression and indeed addressing those heightened racial tensions. Well, joining us on the line now is Mohammed.
Muslim, I totally condemn this barbaric and evil crime. If they think that they have the right to kill innocent people because they disagree with cartoons, then they're living in a parallel universe. We as Muslims abhor the terrorism, we abhor their actions, and they don't do it in my name or the name of my great faith. I'm somebody who opposes those cartoons, have consistently opposed those cartoons, but do that through the political protests, through the media, and through peaceful methods. There's no excuse for violence whatsoever. And in a democracy, people are free to express themselves how they want to. Equally, we are free to express our opposition to those cartoons, but no violence is ever the solution to any problem.
Are you surprised, though, by what unfolded at the offices this morning?
I'm not surprised, because we're obviously facing a heightened threat now from ISIS and other terrorist organisations who think that the best way to damage relations in our countries is to carry out lone wolf attacks, as we saw in London last year with Lee Rigby, as we've seen so brutally today in Paris. We as Muslims, as Christians, as Jews, as people of no faith, all need to come together and unify against this threat. The terrorists want to divide us, and in that we must make.
Has a line been crossed, do you think, for this paper?
Well, I think if you want to challenge Islam, if you want to have an engagement and a debate with Islam and Muslims, then we in the Muslim community are up for that debate. It's going to be based on tolerance, it's going to be based on evidence, and it's going to be based on respect. And these sort of satirical cartoons that depict the Prophet Muhammad are an affront to our faith, something which I oppose. But again, I go to this very central principle. The journalists are free to make those cartoons, to draw those cartoons and promote their issues in a free society, and we're equally able to challenge that in a peaceful manner. There's no place for violence or terrorism or death threats against anybody. Any person was subjected to death threats last year by Al-Shabaab and Al-Qaeda, so we won't take, we won't be taking any lectures, if you like, from these terrorists who want to cause harm and division. And my thoughts and prayers are with the families of those that have been injured and been killed in Paris today.
Are you worried about what an attack like this, done by a group using the name Allah in the name of the Muslim community there, what it does to people that are living not only in Paris and France but in England as well?
It confuses people. When we see what goes on in Syria and when we see what goes on around the world, people think that somehow violence is acceptable. You know, I ask people not to take what I say as the basis for their opinion on Islam. Talk to the thousands of Muslim scholars from every different strand, Sufi, Wahhabi, Shia, every background, who've been very consistent in saying terrorism is unacceptable, it's an affront to our faith, and we must not stand by and watch it happen and try legitimising it. There's no excuse for it. And we've got a huge debate going on within the Muslim community about this issue. There's a huge challenge now to expose this ideology, the sources of funding, where it comes from, and above all, to say to young people that if you want to challenge what goes on in Syria, if you want to highlight the issue of Palestine and the Israelis, then the way to do that is through the political process, is through peaceful methods in this country and around the world, and not through violence. And anybody who engages in violence is an enemy, not just of the state, but is an enemy of Muslims around the world.
Mohammed Shafiq, we're grateful for your time. Thank you very much for joining us.
And in fact, following on from what Mohammed was saying, that debate is happening in the Muslim community globally. Just got a statement from the Arab League chief Nabil Al-Arabi strongly condemns the terrorist attack on Charlie Hebdo newspaper in Paris. Also, Al-Azhar, the Sunni Islam's most prestigious centre of learning in Egypt, issuing a statement condemning what it calls this criminal attack, saying that Islam denounces any violence. And we'll keep you across what's coming through via social media as well. But let's bring in our next guest, Martin George Edmund Rosen, who's a British editorial cartoonist and novelist. Martin, thanks for coming on to speak to us on BBC News. Did you know any of these journalists at Charlie Hebdo?
I didn't know them personally, but I knew the work of some of them, and I just, first of all, I want to say, it's part of the political process, taunting, name-calling, and giving offence. But it's this idea that has become so current for the last 15 years or so.
Say, to an extent, the journalists brought it on themselves.
I'd say that is a truly offensive thing to say. Truly offensive. I personally am offended by all sorts of things. It doesn't mean I'm going to go and murder somebody. And to say that, they have done something which has offended somebody else and therefore they should be murdered, well, that's a barbaric medieval despotism. That's the kind of society we, I hope, don't live in.
Assessment be of that comment and how you move forward with this?
I don't necessarily think that's true. It's the kind of thing people say at horrific moments like these, that nothing will ever be the same again. That the best thing that can happen is to laugh these barbarians back into the dustbin of history, actually. The reason they have done what they've done is because they cannot bear the idea of being laughed at, because their ideology is so comprehensively ludicrous. And it's ludicrous not because of the spiritual dimension of it, but because they believe everybody should believe what they believe. And if anybody disagrees with them, they murder them. And that is a ludicrous, preposterous notion, and they should be laughed at for it.
But can satirical journalism have its place in French society after this?
Of course it can.
Will they be brave enough to do it, is my point.
Well, that's another issue. I mean, after 10 years ago, the Danish cartoon business, which was... people forget over 100 people died as a consequence of that. All of them happened to be Muslims, shot on the streets of Muslim countries because they've been fermented into rioting by Muslim clerics. This time, cartoonists have died. Last time, cartoonists didn't die. But it's the idea that, you could never produce a cartoon again. You could never draw a mocking portrait of anybody at all because there might be a danger that they will take offence and kill you. But, if the response is we don't draw anything anymore, they've won.
Well, let's, at this point, bring in some of the cartoons that Charlie Hebdo has published over the last years. It's been known for perhaps taunting radical Islam over the last 10 years or so. It's got a track record on this.
Which don't mean very much because you can always trace who's sending them. These people were having genuine death threats. But I repeat the point that you cannot cave into these barbarians because a word about it. You won't comment on the fact that you're murderers. We'll say you're absolutely fine. Shh, shh, shh. That's the worst thing we could possibly do.
We will just remind our viewers on BBC News that they've been looking at some of the images, some of the cartoons that have been put out by Charlie Hebdo, although not perhaps the most controversial image of all, that of the Prophet Muhammad. But we have been showing some of their work here today.
And we should say that the latest tweet that was published by the magazine was a cartoon of the Islamic State militant group leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Some speculating, of course, the link between that and perhaps it's being carried out by Islamic State militants. We don't know if that is the case. We're waiting to see what developments come out regarding who is responsible for this attack. But I'm keen to find out from you in terms of using cartoon as a form to relay jokes or political messages. What is it about this form that is so powerful that people that might not even be engaged in any political dialogue seem to resonate with those messages?
Well, it's first of all, it's a very ancient form. It's been part of the political conversation in this country for over 300 years. It's also the way people consume it. They don't slowly nibble their way through the words like they do with an editorial article or another article in a newspaper. They swallow the whole thing whole, and quite often choke on it because it has a sort of voodoo effect. It is voodoo. It's doing damage at distance with a sharp object, in this case a pen. The purpose is to taunt. The purpose is to annoy. The purpose is to actually be satirical. Is to mock. Is to laugh, which is a very powerful tool. And
but it's not in a light-hearted way, is it?
No. As I said, it's assassination without the blood. But the point is without the blood. But we've had satirical responses to people in power, and certainly the caliph, so-called caliph, is a very powerful man, and I think it's very interesting that it appears that his response to being just depicted is to murder people. just like the response of the dictator of North Korea, the fact that he might be laughed at in a Hollywood movie is to start hacking into Sony Pictures and to cause a major diplomatic incident. These are people who cannot bear, in their ludicrous presumptions to power and despotism, to be laughed at.
Martin Roseland, thank you very much for coming in to speak to us on BBC News. Thank you. Now, Olivier Guita is a consultant in security issues and counter-terrorism. He joins us from central London. Olivier, first, could you give us an idea of what the practical priorities now must be in carrying out this manhunt?
Look, really, everything will fall down to if it might be returning jihadists from Syria and Iraq. Because remember, compared to other attacks that we've seen around, if they were in France, I suspect that they had them on their radar.
And this, I presume, is now...
Medine Mouche. He went through France before going to Belgium, and it was the German security services that alerted everyone. So you are right. It is really a manhunt or a matter that has to be taken care of at the European level.
And one of the other key issues must be, this looks very well organised. These men could have been part of a wider network rather than this being a small cell. We just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, what is troubling is what one of the witnesses said, that they were claiming they were from Al-Qaeda in Yemen. If that's the case, then you have another narrative and another major issue coming up is that in the past we've seen ISIS as the main jihadist group. But now we're going back, if the AQ link is confirmed in the next few days, to the way AQ has done it. It's very well organized. They have cells in different countries, and they are very focused. So they are attacking the targets that they say they would attack. And it's very meaningful that people are surprised today of what's happening to Charlie Hebdo. But as you said in your program, 2011, the offices were firebombed. 2012, a man was arrested because he wanted to behead the editor-in-chief of Charlie Hebdo. So the writing was on the wall, unfortunately.
Olivier, we are waiting to hear again from the French President, Francois Hollande. We've heard the Interior Minister say that all resources will be mobilised to neutralise these three criminals. But in practical terms, what can they do apart from vigilance now the men have got away?
Oh, it's going to be very difficult. I mean, as I said, the way they're going to be able to get them is, I trust the French security services have done a very, very historical legwork on those issues, and they have monitored a lot of people. So by just pure human intelligence, they might get the information that will lead to those people. But as I said, if they were people that were totally under the radar, homegrown jihadists that were not really part of any cell, which I suspect it's not the case, it's going to be very difficult, except if you have a member of the family coming forward or a friend saying, look, I think I have to denounce one of my brothers or my dad. He was part of that attack. But you are totally right. It's going to be very difficult if human intelligence and if those guys were not on the radar.
Olivier Guite, thank you for your expertise.
And as we were just hearing with Philippa there, that Francois Hollande is expected to address the public in France at, I think, 7 o'clock in the evening local time. And as you would imagine, world leaders have been commenting on this story directly. We heard from President Obama offering his support in finding the attackers of this, calling it an abhorrent attack. And we also heard from the British Prime Minister David Cameron, who tweeted, "The murders in Paris are sickening. We stand with the French people in the fight against terror and defending the freedom of press." Well, let's take you live to the State Department, where we understand that the US Secretary of State John Kerry was due to hold a routine news conference alongside the Polish Foreign Minister, where they were expected to address on the agenda